Hello. This week's Torah portion is Mishpatim, meaning laws. The Israelites have just heard the Ten Commandments, and now they learn the details. The parasha has no less than 53 commandments. It begins with, quote, "When you acquire a Hebrew slave, he shall serve you for 6 years, but in the 7th year he shall go free without paying anything," unquote. And the next 4 verses give more details on how the slave is to be treated. That's odd. Why begin with the validation of slavery, albeit with restrictions, when the Israelites themselves have just been rescued from slavery? We expected the Torah to say, "You shall not enslave another person, because you yourselves were slaves in the land of Egypt." But it doesn't. Why not? Because God concluded that Jews would not have accepted the Torah if some allowances were not made for existing practices. Let's begin at the beginning. There are 3 types of injunctions in the Torah. First, negative commandments. You must not do this. Second, allowed activities. You must do this within commanded limits. Third, positive commandments. You must do this. Over the centuries, the rabbis treated them differently. Let's begin with negative commandments. They were never qualified. They were beyond the limits of proper behavior. The rabbis could not find a logical reason for allowing that which is forbidden, except to save a life. You may violate any commandment to save a life, except those against idolatry, sexual immorality, and murder. Let's move on to allowed activities. You may do this, but within commanded limits. Over time, the rabbis limited or banned practices that were allowed in the Torah on various grounds, particularly when the law of the land did not permit it. Here are some examples. First, no slavery. Slavery is allowed but heavily regulated in the Torah, where it is really akin to indentured servitude. The Talmud added many humane requirements, such as slaves should get food, drink, lodging, and bedding similar to their masters, which leads it to conclude, quote, "Whoever buys himself a slave buys himself a master," unquote. Now slavery is illegal everywhere. Second, no polygamy. Polygamy has been very rare since biblical times. It was not practiced by the prophets or the 1,569 rabbis in the Talmud and Midrash. It was banned 1,000 years ago among Ashkenazim by Rabbeinu Gershom to prevent matrimonial strife. The ban has expired and the practice is on its way out. It was very rare among Sephardim in Muslim countries, which is where it is allowed, and at any rate, very few Jews live there today. Third, no sota. A woman suspected of adultery by her husband was made to drink bitter waters, and if she died, she was deemed guilty. The practice was discontinued by Rabban Yohanan ben Zakkai in the 1st century on the grounds that too many men were adulterers. Fourth, no levirate marriage. The Torah says that when a man dies childless, his brother must marry the widow. If either refuses, both must do halitza, a symbolic act to renounce the marriage. Jewish law strongly encourages halitza. In Israel, halitza is mandatory, and levirate marriage is prohibited by secular law. Fifth, no Nazirite vows. A Nazirite is one who voluntarily takes on a vow to abstain from grapes and derivatives, refrain from cutting his hair, and refrain from being near corpses. It's for a set period of time, but it can only end with a sin offering, which cannot be offered today because there is no temple. So today, a Nazirite would remain so for life. But the Talmud says, quote, Rabbi Elazar HaKapar the Great says, "The Nazirite sinned by the distress he caused himself when he abstained from wine. He is called a sinner and requires atonement," unquote. Maimonides also adopts this view. There have been no known Nazirites since Middle Ages, and the practice is heavily discouraged. Sixth, no astrology. Astrology was common among Jews. The Talmud accepts it, but the rabbis were divided as to where the power of the stars extends to the Jews and whether virtue could change what the stars decree. Maimonides very strongly opposed belief in astrology, going against the tide of his time and later. Quote, "Know that I myself have investigated astrology. It is stupidity. The assertions of the stupid astrologers, they are nothing. I know that you may find sayings of sages in the Talmud and Midrashim whose words appear to maintain that at the moment of a man's birth, the stars will cause such and such to happen to him. Do not regard this as a difficulty. Possibly the matter was hidden from them, or there may be an allusion to those words, or they may have been said with a view to the times and the business before him. You surely know how many verses of the Torah are not to be taken literally. Astrology is a disease, not a science. It is a tree under the shadow of which all sorts of superstitions thrive. Only fools and charlatans lend value to it." Unquote. In time, the Code of Jewish Law took a clear stand against astrology, but without saying it is without value. Quote, "One should not consult astrologers, nor should one cast lots to determine the future." Unquote. Nevertheless, astrology continues to be practiced. Seventh, no marriage to captive women. The Torah says that if a soldier captures a woman in war, he may marry her, even against her will, or let her go free after a month. During that time, she shall make herself unappealing by shaving her head, letting her nails grow, wearing shabby clothes, and mourning for her family. The Talmud calls it a concession to our evil inclination, and records the fact that King David had 400 captive wives. The Midrash notes that the Torah verses for the captive woman are followed by the verses on the hated wife and then by the verses on the rebellious son. This means one who marries the captive woman will eventually hate her and will have wicked children with her. Unquote. There is universal disapproval of the practice among commentators, and there is no record of it happening since biblical times. The third category is positive commandments. You must do this. Most of them are severely restricted today for various reasons. Here are some examples. First, no animal sacrifices. The Torah mandates sacrifices in the temple and only there. Quote, "Take care not to sacrifice your burnt offerings in any place you like, but only in the place that the Lord will choose, and there you shall observe all that I command you." Unquote. The Romans destroyed the temple in the year 70, and it has not been rebuilt. Therefore, no sacrifices. Furthermore, Maimonides, in his Guide for the Perplexed, downplays the value of sacrifices, arguing that they were only a transitional step between the human sacrifices performed by the pagans and the kind of worship God really wanted, which is prayer. If God had asked for only prayer back then, the people would not have followed. They were not ready to confine their worship to something so abstract. Here's what Maimonides says, quote, "The custom in those days, among all men, consisted in sacrificing animals. God did not command us to give up these practices, for this would have been contrary to the nature of man, who generally cleaves to that to which he is used. Sacrifices, however, are not the primary object of the commandments about sacrifices. Prayers are. To wit, we were not commanded to sacrifice in every place and in every time, at any time, or to build a temple in every place, or to allow anybody to become a priest and sacrifice. Only one temple has been appointed, and only, as the Torah says, in the place which the Lord shall choose. In no other place are we allowed to sacrifice. The Torah says, be careful not to give your burnt offerings in every place you see. And only the members of a particular family were allowed to officiate as priests, the Kohanim. All these restrictions serve to limit that kind of worship. But prayer and supplication can be offered anywhere and by every person. Because of this, the prophets rebuke people for being overzealous in bringing sacrifices. Unquote. However, in his halachic work, the Mishneh Torah, he is careful not to remove sacrifices. Quote, the king Messiah will build the holy temple and gather the dispersed of Israel and reinstate all the laws of the Torah as before. The sacrifices will be offered, and the sabbatical year and the Jubilee year will be instituted as outlined in the Torah. Unquote. In this, he is even contradicting the Midrash, which says that in the Messianic age, all sacrifices will be discontinued, except for the Thanksgiving offering. Second, no death penalty. The death penalty is mandated by the Torah for many infractions, such as idolatry, prohibited sexual behavior, murder, kidnapping, blaspheming, violating Shabbat, giving false testimony in a capital case, and so forth. Yet the Mishnah says, a court that sentences one person to death in 7 years is a bloody court. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah added, make that once in 7 years. Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva added, if we were on the court, no one would ever be put to death. To effect this change of heart, the rabbis resorted to requiring high levels of evidence. In the case of adultery, for example, they decreed that conviction requires 2 independent witnesses to the act of idolatry, who are observant and not related, and that the defendant must have been warned of the consequences of his or her acts before the event. Note that this approach is different from that of liberal or secular Judaism, which says simply to ignore the injunction. Such an attitude breaks Jewish continuity. It is also different from the Christian approach, which says, let he who is without sin cast the first stone. Indeed, there is no Jewish requirement that the judge or executioner be blameless himself. The rabbis also added that if death sentence is unanimous among the 23 judges, the defendant goes free. This gave rise to the practice of giving the defendant a defense attorney. The last death sentence given by a Jewish court was in the year 30 CE. Third, no mandatory forgiveness of debts in the 7th year. The Torah says that every 7th year all debts are cancelled. The problem is that lenders will be reluctant to lend money to the poor, especially near the end of the 7-year cycle. In the Mishnah, Hillel rules that we must treat all debts as debts to the court, not to an individual. Such debts are not cancelled. It's called prosbul. Fourth, no killing of Amalekites. The Torah enjoins us to destroy all the descendants of Amalek because he attacked the Israelites in the rear in the desert after the Exodus. He is the archetypal enemy of the Jews, the symbol of evil and anti-Semitism. The Torah says, you shall blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. Do not forget. Killing Amalekites is not done today. Why? Because the rabbis of the Talmud decreed that we lost the ability to recognize their descendants. In the Bible, we learn that Sennacherib, king of Assyria, deported and redistributed close to 5 million people in the 7th century BCE. And the Talmud says, Sennacherib came and through his policy of population transfer, scrambled all the nations. Unquote. What do we conclude from all this? 2 things. First, when the Torah created a new practice, it endured. Examples are Shabbat, Kashrut, Mikvah, Shatnez, circumcision, and ethical commandments. But when the Torah just regulated an existing practice, it did not endure. Examples are sacrifices, slavery, polygamy, sota, death penalty, and levirate marriage. Judaism is evolving. Shabbat Shalom.